Next slide, please. Cargo Brands is a well-established company and has been around for a long time. This has accumulated many resources over time and a well-connected supply chain. In this slide, you will identify the slides in different ways of interacting and continue with the business of life. A few years ago, I listened to a very important political leader making a speech, and in that speech, he mentioned entrepreneurship like at least 13 times. So that got my attention, and the next morning, I wrote a blog where I said, talking entrepreneurship is hallucination. And that blog costed me a seat on a corporate board because I was asked to withdraw the blog and I did not, and it costed me that seat. But if I were going to fight that that dismissal from this board, the lawyer I would have picked would have been Allon, because Mr. Riaz here is probably one of the very few people whose voice I listen to quite a lot when it comes up to speaking entrepreneurship. And he would, we agree on the principle that entrepreneurship is not about talking it, it's about acting. It is an action rather than talk about. And when I said talking about entrepreneurship is hallucination, that's exactly what I meant. If I was going to hire a lawyer, I would have brought him to fight on my corner. Because if there's anyone who has walked the path, who has done so much in teaching, who has done so much in training, and bringing other entrepreneurs on board and showing them the way, it will be Allon. So this is quite important to the business school that we managed to bring you back. You have been a very important contributor to the Faith's Entrepreneurial Program. You have guest lectured to our master's classes, and I'm actually happy to say that program, which you have been a guest lecturer to, is now 10 years. The Faith's Master's Entrepreneurship, and all our master's classes from MBA or postgraduate diplomas now take entrepreneurship as a compulsory module, and that fits. And it's not only in South Africa where you spend a lot of time teaching, training, and advising and building businesses. You are also an Oxford resident, entrepreneurial and resident. You have spoken to global communities through the World Economic Forum, and there could be no better person than you to actually come and remind us what is entrepreneurship as a journey and what we should look forward to. And on that note, let's all welcome Allon Riaz, please. And Allon, over to you.
Thank you, Doctor. Thanks for all those kind words. If I can ask you to please mute, because I'm getting feedback as well. But thank you. And when that introduction, I always feel like an imposter, and we'll talk about that as well, because, you know, relatively speaking, everything's relative. So when you look at other people, what they have done and what they've achieved, it's considerably more than what I've achieved. But I've really been privileged to work with over 13,000 entrepreneurs over the last 20 years. And I thought when I was asked to do this lecture, I thought I would take you through some very quick, easy bullet points, not lots of, not death by PowerPoint, but some very quick and easy ideas that you, if you are entrepreneurial or you are an entrepreneur right now or considering it, that perhaps these are some of the lessons that you can take from my journey. And in the part two, I'm going to be talking about what I've learned during this COVID period. So let's just start with my story, and I'm going to précis my story very, very quickly. My story, I'm a Durbanite. I grew up in Durban to entrepreneurial parents. For reasons I won't get into, I left a family business, and I landed up literally from the streets in Durban. I landed up on the streets, and it wasn't drugs. If your mind, your imagination goes there, it wasn't that. And I then landed up working for a friend of mine in a clothing retail store. And I went to the University of KZN, Pietermaritzburg campus. I actually started off doing agriculture, believe it or not, and then changed to a BCom. And so I thought I understood business because I'd done a BCom and I did honors. I started my master's, and actually I've even been twice a PhD dropout. I've dropped out of PhD twice. I'm also a PhD dropout. So I thought at that time I knew about business, and I went to work for a friend of mine and turned his business around, and I did a promotion which got me into the newspaper. And for those of you who are Durbanites, the Daily News. And there was a big article on page 4 with a picture of me in that article. And later that day I got a call at about 10 o'clock in the morning from a man. And the phone call went something like this, Mr. Riaz? I said, yes. I've just seen the article. I like what I've seen. I'm sending my driver to pick you up. Anyway, the BMW with tinted windows arrives. I look inside, the guy's smaller than me. I thought, okay, I'll get inside. So whisked me off to a place called Prefco House, up onto the 4th floor, and there I meet this man. And he asked me a whole bunch of questions, and he says, I want to back you. I'll back you in any business that you like. And I didn't believe him. So I went back to the shop, and my friend John said to me, what was that all about? And I said, well, it's some crazy guy. But 2 weeks later, same man phones it back again and says to me, well, what are you still doing there? And I said, you know, you couldn't be serious. And he said, I couldn't be more serious. And so a whole journey begins now where I can go into any business I like. And what is that business going to be? So now, what business can you get into? Now, I'm a 23-year-old kid. Quite frankly, I've got no experience. I think I know a lot, which is possibly it's a good thing and a bad thing. And I come up with this business after a couple of weeks called the New York Sausage Factory, and I set up my first. It was a retail. Basically selling hot dogs, and I opened my first store in Pinetown, and I did 580 rand and 20 cents turnover in my first day, and that was like the most amount of money I ever did in that store, and I couldn't make this business work. And I tried and I tried and I tried, and I woke up early for a start a breakfast trade and the evening trade, and I couldn't make this business work. And finally, after 6 months and actually physically putting myself in hospital because I just was working so hard, I finally decided that I had failed and went to see him and went to his apartment. He had a beautiful apartment, went up in the elevator, was all nervous. I walk inside and quite dramatically said, you know, I failed, and if it takes me the rest of my life, I'll pay you back. And so it was getting up to go because I was so nervous. I mean, I had everything. Think about what I had. I had a private education. I had tertiary education. I had money from an investor. I had a mentor. I had everything that you could possibly need and want to start a business, and yet I had failed. So I felt like a tremendous failure. And as I was walking to the lift, he said, sit down. And I don't know if you can use the word crapped yourself, but I'm going to. I crapped myself, and I sat down, and he said to me, did I back you or did I back the business? And I said, you backed me. So he says, right now, the business has failed. If you walk out that door, if you get in that lift, you have failed. What would you do if you had to do this again differently? So I said, I changed the menu, the venue, the pricing, and I gave him a whole list of those things. And so he said, okay, I'm going to back you again, but this time I'm not going to give you money. I'm going to give you people. I'm going to surround you with the right type of people, and you work out how to do this. And I opened my second store in a place called the Pavilion Shopping Center in Westville, and it was an absolute success. Just to give you an idea, we were selling about 3,000 hot dogs a month out of a 52 square meter little store there. So So what Raise Corp is for me, if you think about there's a whole journey in between, but when I started Raise Corp, it was a pay it forward for what happened to me. For somebody had believed in me, somebody had given me a second chance, and somebody had supported me, not just financially, but in terms of people surrounding me with people and understanding of business in a different way to how I'd understood it before. And to me, that's been the privilege of this journey. And I've been 20 years in Raise Corp, as I mentioned before, 13,000 businesses I have supported. I've made many, many millionaires over that time. And it's an absolute, I think, gift, especially right now during COVID time, to be part of the solution as opposed to be sitting on the sidelines wondering what you can do. So that's a quick story as to where my journey, and the interesting thing for me is I've had an entrepreneurial journey within an entrepreneurial journey, if that makes sense. So the first point here, based on my story, is that our success is flavored with so much luck. It's just filled with luck. If you look at, I remember seeing a survey that Ernst & Young did many years ago. They looked at 22 key success factors of entrepreneurs, and out of 22, the entrepreneurs had put the last one, number 22 out of 22 was luck. Number 1 was hardworking. Number 2 was risk-taking, whatever the case may be, and right at the bottom was luck. But if you look at the research further, it showed that every single respondent said that they were lucky. And when asked why, if it was lucky, why is that not number 1? The answer is, well, everyone has luck. And to Doc's point, I did something about it. I didn't speak about it, I did something about it. But for me, a big part of identifying entrepreneurs, I cannot stand the entrepreneurs who go, they talk about how wonderful they are, and they go, I had this vision and I was a visionary and I saw this. That's BS for me. For me, what most 99% of entrepreneurial stories is this meandering with a lot of luck in our story. And we have to recognize luck as part of our story. And once again, going back to the concept of luck, it's what we do about that luck. It's what we do with that's important. Now, I get a lot of questions from people, especially who are in corporate or people who've got side hustles. Is when's the point when do I jump? And there seems to be a fantasy that there isn't, like there is a reality where you don't have to make the jump. For me, every single entrepreneurial story, there is a point, just like when you jump into a pool with cold water, there is always a point where you go, okay, I'm in, and then you jump. And it is freezing as you hit that water. It is very, very, it's scary and it's exciting and all those things at the same time. But for me, the question, I wanted to put this in here because a lot of people fantasize about a very natural move into making the decision to be an entrepreneur. There's always a point where there's an opportunity cost. Do I get a job? Do I work? Do I start a side hustle and then do it? But there's always a point where you say, I'm in, I'm going to do it. I spoke about the imposter syndrome, and this is something so common. If you read about entrepreneurship and read of entrepreneurs, this is something common with almost all entrepreneurs that I've come across, this imposter syndrome. And I have it and have had it too. Because every time your business grows, so when I started the business, well, I'm an entrepreneur. And I remember, I'll give you a 30-second view on how the name Raise Corp came up. So my surname's Raise. There we are. So you think that's how it came. It actually didn't come from that. It actually came from a poker game. And I was playing poker and I was now unemployed. This was before Raise Corp. I was unemployed. And there was Dimension Data had launched a thing called Internetics. And there was a guy in my poker school who was tasked to get people to come to this. And there were 2 people, Paul Harris and Clem Sunter, who were speaking, and they wanted to get all these corporate people to come see them speak. So I said, I'll come. And the guy said, no, you can't come because you're unemployed. You can't come. This is for corporate guys. So I said, Ronnie, I'm coming. I'm coming. So he said, you can't come. Anyway, I arrived. And because it was the first one and they were waiting for people to arrive, I arrived at the place where you sign in and the registration, and the lady said your name, and I said Allon, and then you could see it, you know, Allon Riaz, and then this Ronnie came running up to me and he said, "What are you doing here?" And this lady said, "What is the name of your company?" And he said to me, "Please say something corporate." So she says, "Sir, what's the name of your company?" And I just saw my surname and I said, Riaz Corp. And I had a badge now, and I was now Riaz Corp. Imposter syndrome. It was not, there was no company. But I had already been a shareholder in a small little ad agency, 2 ad agencies, one from Durban and one in Johannesburg. And so when walking around, people said, "What do you do?" I said, I've got a group of advertising companies. Meantime, it was a 1-man band and a 3-man band. So you're always feeling like you're an imposter on this journey. And when you get to 10 people and when you get to 20 people, it's always the biggest business you've ever run. And as the business grows, that feeling never goes away. And I've started to enjoy that feeling of almost an excitement about, will they catch me? Will they catch me? So if you're feeling that as an entrepreneur, it's very natural. Lose that damn business plan. This was the first business a business book I wrote called Lose the Business Plan. And it's not don't do the business plan. It's about lose the business plan. For me, all business plans look exactly the same. There's a J curve. I need money. I need more money, and then I'm going to make lots and lots of money. And you know, in the body copy of the business plan, there's I need 2 million rand. For what? What do you need 2 million rand for? Warehousing. For warehousing. For what do you need warehousing for in your business? No, for all the money I'm going to make. I don't trust the banks with that money. Look at the curve. Maybe we make so much money in year 3. It's always that hockey stick. It's always that J curve. And yeah, font 14 Calibri. There you put your name of your company, and they all look the same. And yet the statistics show that 96% of businesses fail within a 10-year period. In other words, it's the opposite curve. So to me, this whole concept of a business plan, and by the way, it's a very interesting story how business plans were actually designed by a consulting business in the 60s in the US for the banking system as a checklist. Okay, but I won't go into that right now. We haven't got enough time. But here you've got a 96% failure, and yet most businesses require a business plan to get funding. And it wasn't, to me, it wasn't reconciling. For me, my personal belief, and this is my personal journey as a mentee and as an investee, is I back the jockey, not the horse. Now, I was saying this 20 years ago. Now it's become popular. Before, I was all about looking for people who have got blue heart, that ability to stand up again and again. You rather back the team. If you've got a great entrepreneur, they will see opportunity on the way, and they will navigate obstacles. That to me is far more important than somebody who can write a beautiful business plan. And just by the way, if you ever arrive at my offices with a business plan, and I get this often, and it's still warm from the photostat machine, and you come and you give me that business plan, this is what I will do. You will give it to me, and I will say, how do you make money? And you will say, well, it's in the business plan. It's in the business plan. And I said, no. How do you make money in the business? And you'll say, no, it's in there on page 47 in the business plan. We show you how we do that. I said, I don't want to read it. How do you make money? And then they refer to the business plan. And then I take that big, thick business plan and I tear it up in front of them, and their eyes go like this. And I go, I can't see now. Tell me how you make money. And why I do that is because for me, it's far more important that the entrepreneur knows how money is made in that business. It cannot be on a document. And in South Africa, we've got a terrible thing going on where business plans are produced by third parties who have little to no knowledge about your business. And the financial system requires this business plan in order to give you money. And the more thud quality that has, the bigger and thicker it is, the more graphs, the more pie graphs there are, the more trend graphs there are, the more research there is, the more likely you are going to get your money. And yet 96% of these businesses fail. So it's the wrong metric. And so I always get invited once to go and speak at a bank. I never get invited again. I just don't understand why. Anyway, lose the business plan. You always underestimate how much time it takes to become successful. Always when entrepreneurs arrive, you think you go in year 3, I'm going to make money. If you think it's year 3, it's going to be year 5. If you think it's within 12 months, it's going to be in 24 months. The rule of thumb is whatever your calculations say is going to be true, it's double. Okay. So that to me is very, very important, that you start to understand that building a successful business, and I underline the word sustainable successful business. Building a sustainable successful business takes time. You have to build the infrastructure, the process infrastructure in the business. You have to build the foundational stuff in the business. And at the same time, if it's going to take more time, it's going to take more money. So for me, the important thing, if you're going to set up a business, if you think you're going to need 100,000 Rand, you're going to need 500,000. If you think you're going to need 1 million, you're going to need 2.5 million. You're always going to need more money. And it's important if you're going for funding. There's a wonderful saying, go to the well once. You go to the well once, in other words, to the funder once. Rather have more money than you need so that you don't have to keep going back to try and raise further funding. And by the way, just as an aside, my strong belief is that you don't need money to start a business. And I hope I cover this. I think you need a compelling economic right to exist to start a business, not money. And so many people focus on just getting this money, that they don't focus on building a compelling economic right to exist. This I'll put in here because this is true for entrepreneurs. Any entrepreneur that is watching now, everyone seems to be having more fun than you are. You seem to be like working like a dog on weekends, and people are having a lot of fun. I don't know. I'll put this in here because for me, this seems so unfair. And even at some point in the future, you know, when they said that, you know, you have to put in the hard work so that you can have the fun later. Somehow that, you know, this journey is about, not about the fun, it's about enjoying your business. And if you understand how to enjoy building your business, and that's my big joy, is building this business. I have, ironically, an academic approach to building the business. For me, it's a model, and I think about how do I solve problems and build this model, and I have fun that way in my business. Or maybe I'm just boring and fuddy-duddy. And then coming back to that imposter syndrome, sort of the corollary to that is that everyone seems to be more successful. Doc mentioned, you know, my work with the World Economic Forum, and I was nominated a few years ago as a young global leader. That was before way before the grey hair. And you know, you're amongst all these people, you know, you certainly have imposter syndrome then, but you've got these people who've done such incredible things, and everyone seems on your journey to be way more successful than you are. And the way for anyone who's watching this, who's listening here, who's feeling that way, you've got to get to a point that this is, first of all, this is you're playing the long game and not the short game. And secondly, this is your journey and they've got their journey. And what I find often, and I'll tell you this, and now that I know it's been recorded, it's on public record, there are many people who are on TV who are so-called successful entrepreneurs. We're back at the ranch. I am funding them because they are broke, but they've got the persona of this thing that's who they are, but they are not as successful as they make out to be. So don't be taken by the flash and what people say. Just try and understand that you, as an entrepreneur, you need to build a successful business your way. It's your way to build it, and don't worry about how successful or unsuccessful other people are. This, to me, you know, there is a sense that I get from many entrepreneurs that there's some nirvana, there's some pivotal point right at the top, or the apex point of your journey, where you reach the top, where you don't worry about money, and you don't worry about cash flow, and you don't worry about people, and it's all taken care of. I have never met an entrepreneur, including my mentor, who's a dollar billionaire. I've never met an entrepreneur, excuse me. I've never met an entrepreneur where they've reached the top. There's always an issue to solve. There are always concerns in a business, and it's relentless. It's like life. You know, I'm sure you're all feeling the huge stress of what's going on now. It's that all the time for 20, 30 years. It is relentless. And why I say this particularly to young entrepreneurs, because I want to get out the fantasy that there's these fantasies about these speedboats and mansions and all these things, and that's a small subset of people, and it takes time for most people to get there. Of course, there are exceptions to this. There definitely are, and I hope all the exceptions are watching today. But the moment you have this mental model that I'm going to get rich quickly and it's going to be easy, when you don't get rich quickly and it's not easy, you give up. And that for me is a big issue. Now, quickly, I'll take a quick little aside here. I'm speaking very fast. I'm sorry, Doc and Retendo for that, but I'm trying to get through a lot of stuff here, a lot of volume. So if you look at South Africa, if you look at the 96%, there's also research that shows out of the US that shows that 90% out of the 96% wake up one morning and just give up. They say, I cannot do it. In other words, 90% of all businesses that close down are closed down voluntarily. They are not put into liquidation. They cannot handle the pain, the mental anguish, the fact that they can't pay their bills, etc., and all the stress that comes with it. So for me, if you are able to get entrepreneurs through that pain and push them through that, and support them through that, that to me, just if for those who are policymakers, it's one of these soft things, but actually you will get more return for your money if you assist people to stay in their business versus starting a business. It's a better return there. And the second thing that I want to talk about here is the concept of re-entry rate. Now, South Africa has a re-entry rate of 1.1. In other words, we start once, we fail, we never come back. Our whole system is a shame-based system, and shame, man, and there's shame in your society, shame in your family, shame in your community if you fail. America has 3.6 times re-entry rates. You fail 3.6 times before you say, okay, I'm not good at this. And to me, if you look at me, I nearly was one part of that 1.1 times. Because if had my mentor not encouraged me to try again, I wouldn't be sitting here in front of you talking. I'd be in some unknown job somewhere else. So it's very important, I think, that when conceiving about supporting entrepreneurs, that you understand that you have to support entrepreneurs, particularly when they're feeling down. But that's all soft stuff, and it's much nicer to show graphs. There's no such thing as work-life balance, especially at the start. And to me, when I have entrepreneurs, I coming here for, especially if I'm investing in those entrepreneurs, ask them about, so tell me about your life, etc., and how do you feel about this? And they talk about work-life balance. At that moment, I switch off like this. If I look at their tea to see how far they are before they finish their tea, because I'm not going to back an individual who looks at work-life balance at the start. There is no way that you can have work-life balance, in my opinion, in my experience, at the beginning and become successful. So for me, it is an obsession required. I love these entrepreneurs with obsession. You can see they're obsessed. They've got this heat coming out of their eyes. There's an intensity. They want to succeed so much. Then when you're building your business, it's a cliche, but it's true that your team is everything. And so to me, it's about navigating the different parts of your journey and building the relevant team that is required for that size of your business, and I'm going to come back to that. But building your team should be the one thing that you focus on in building your business. And this is where I was going with that. There are stages of growth and people for those stages. What I see with many entrepreneurs, the mistake they make, and by the way, I have made and still make to some extent, and I'm conscious of it, is the fact that they'll horses for courses. There are people that come in that can grow to a certain point in the business and no further. And because of our loyalty and because of all the human stuff, we keep people in the system until they become completely inept, that the business is bigger than them. And then we get upset and they get upset and we wasted money and we break up on bad terms. If you want to read a great book, read Hoffman, Blitz Scaling. He talks about this in way more detail. And when reading it, I go, that was completely my experience, is that when the business is 1 to 10 people, there's a certain type of individual. 10 to 50, there's another type of individual. 50 to 150, another individual, etc. And you've got to be able to understand which stage you're in. Then there's a great book called Only the Paranoid Survive. And I love this. And this is about the paranoia, about remaining relevant and being aware that you can be usurped by your competition all the time. I love, I've got a show that I've had for 9 years on TV with Maran Padiachi, and we talk about this often on the show. It's about this healthy paranoia. You have to be healthily paranoid about your, and healthily obsessed, and healthily dysfunctional. So this paranoia about not being aware that somebody is trying to take you out all the time. You have to have that innate in you all the time, that somebody is trying to take you out. And only once you have that, in my opinion, if you've got that innate in you, are you able to move through the different levels relatively unscathed. All right. And I'm going to we're breaking this into 2 parts, and I'm going to stop here for Doc to ask some questions. So, Doc? I really hope I haven't been talking to myself for the last 38 minutes.
No, we're here, Alan. I have been listening attentively.
Okay, now I'm just waiting for Doc. This is the point where Doc came in to ask questions.
Yes, I wonder if he's muted. But maybe while we wait for Doc, I know Matimba had posted a question about how do you approach funders?
How do you approach funders?
Yes.
That's a big question and a very broad question. You approach them with a business case and about why. First of all, you have. It's a big question. I'd have to understand more. But is it that you want debt funding or do you want equity funding? 2 different types of funders. So depending which one he's talking about or she's talking about, I can't remember the name.
I can read what he said. He said he personally sometimes have very good plans, and implementing them at some point requires funding. And so even though he's focused on the plan, then the funding becomes an issue. And he made reference to the fact that, you mentioned that at some point, you needed to build a factory. So how do you go about that when you then need that funding?
For me, what I spoke about is first, before you need funding, you need what I call CERTE, C-E-R-T-E, compelling economic right to exist. So do you have something to sell? Do you have somebody to sell it to? Do you have the ability and desire to sell it? And if you sell it, will you sell it at a profit? That's CERTE, that's compelling economic right to exist. And for me, if you say if you've got something to sell, okay, but a lot of people think that they've got something to sell, but they don't. So for me, and I know it sounds very trite, but like a lot of people say, I've got a cup to sell, but we don't sell cups and everyone, what are you actually selling? So do you have something to sell? Do you have somebody to sell it? Is there a market there that is prepared to buy? And what I see with a lot of business plans that I tear up, but in conversation, into what I see, because I ask for pitch decks, not business plans. I ask for business models and pitch decks. But when when I ask for that, you see that people talk about a market, but they don't understand that market and whether that market will buy what they have. So I want to understand that. Then I want to understand that, do you have the ability to sell and desire to sell? And very often the individual wants to make the thing, but doesn't want to sell. And then it's a switch off. And if I do it, will I make a profit? And that's understanding the numbers. Now, once you got those 4 things right and you understand it here and here, then to me, when you go for funding and the business is ready for funding, that's what you need to get across to a funder. And I'm talking about an equity funder, where you say, this is what I have, it's special in this way, this is who I'm selling to it, and they're going to buy it because of this reason. I have the desire and ability to sell, and let me show you how I make money from it. To me, that's only when you can get to that point, and I'm being very simplistic now, but when you get to that point, then it's time to go for funding. You go any time before, you're wasting your time and you're going to feel really down and out.
Yes, yes. You see, Allon, you're quite right on that observation, because even in class, we meet dozens and dozens of students who believe that funding is the issue, and I always joke and respond and say, are you saying if I give you $1 million now, you will not then run with the business? No, run with the business. But you said you want money. So if you are you're starting this journey so that you can make money, I can give you the money now, so you don't have to be an entrepreneur, which means our understanding of what funding is for and at what stage do we need funding is twisted. And what you are raising there is quite an important, it's an important point. And I'm hoping that the delegate who's asking that question, and it's a question which is on many people's minds and all. But you have raised up other issues. You spoke about mentorship, getting someone who believes in you, and even if people believe in you, you have to take action. And when you're taking action, you might have to go through these imposter syndrome processes. But what is clear coming out of what you're saying is you need to have that self-efficacy, that self-belief that you can do this yourself. You can make this. This is where people call you. I've seen a lot of journalistic pieces on you where they would describe you as a maverick. And when I'm studying and looking at what you are doing and what you've done, I don't think you're a maverick. I rather think that you're actually a trailblazer who is charting a different path on how we should go and how we should not just adapt or wholesome importation of American models, British models, or European models into South Africa or in an African context, because that will not work. America has got its own path, Europe has got their own path. And you are putting up that message, and instead of talking about, you're actually acting upon it, that we need to do things differently. Now, there comes now the point where you're talking about paranoia. Expand on that. At what point would you say this is healthy paranoia, or this is now become psychopathic that I am this paranoid?
Doc, yeah, you just on the paranoia. Let's just talk about the paranoia. The paranoia is really basically a mental state for me that you never ever take your foot off the pedal, and you never feel you've arrived. You never ever do that. And I actually watch entrepreneurs. So first of all, there's an internal paranoia that I'm going to become complacent. I have this internal monitor, am I complacent? And so for me, I've got certain tricks, and I'll share one of them. If I win a deal, I double up my work. If I lose a deal, I double my work. Yeah. So literally, I've got this thing. If I win a deal, I get enthused, and I go after, basically, I go after 2 more. If I lose, I go after 2 more. And in between, inverted commas, I rest. And that to me keeps me, keeps this the fact that I will never be complacent, and I will never give up, that who's going to try and take me out. And to me, I'm hyper alert as to what's going on, and where my weaknesses are, and how, in a weird way, playing chess against yourself and saying, well, if I were my competitor, I'd be making that move against me. So let me bolster that. If I were my competitor, I would do that. And then I see in the marketplace that these competitors are doing this and this, and I'm saying, is this false information? Is it real information? I'm very, very skeptical about what I read and hear, and then I try and interpret that, put dots together. I heard this, I saw this, and then make plans accordingly. So there's this hypervigilance, and maybe that's a better word than paranoia, but there's a hypervigilance externally and internally.
That makes it more clear. It reminds me of a student I had who, after going through the whole program, then came to a conclusion that entrepreneurship requires a certain level of being pathological about it, because one has to find, you need to find your balance, and you cannot. This is where you cannot. We can discuss, but the only way you could get to this is to go through it. You have to do it. That's when you would come back with your own stuff. I have another question from Kieran who's talking.
Can I just respond to that? Your student was right, and 100%. So this whole thing about pathology, about being is correct. There has to be a level of healthy pathology. If there isn't pathology, if you are not slightly like off center, for me, you are unlikely to succeed. And so I look for that pathology, that healthy pathology in entrepreneurs. And the one place, just as a very interesting thing, which I talk about actually quite often, is father issues. There's two psychologists, Collins and Mersch, that show if you've got father issues, you're far more likely to be a successful entrepreneur. So if you've got a father issue, like when you come to me and you talk about your father issues, you like come right to the front of the queue. Because for me, father issues are an incredible indicator of success, and that's pathology. And I've got father issues. My mentor, who's a dollar billionaire, has got father issues. And I'm quite frankly in a dilemma with my two boys, whether I create father issues for them. But maybe, this is it's not a truism, it's just a correlation. So pathology is an important part.
I'm sure she'll be delighted, because the argument was along those lines, where she was saying it requires someone to understand that failure is a learning moment. It's not a defining moment. When you fail, if you take that to be defining, it means you've given up. And she was talking about it from a cancerous perspective, because she comes from a medical background, saying there are people who fight cancer and win, and there are those who have exactly the same conditions who give up. But then treatment becomes useless because they've already given up. And that's why she started thinking that this is pathology. This is where the pathological comes in, that your failing moments should be your learning points rather than defining moments. If you take them to be defining moments, then you're a goner. And that suits up in your Kieran was asking, was talking about bookkeeping. It's like, look, you want to raise funds, and how important should I always keep the eye on the books, because it seems everyone you go to when you want to raise funds, they want to see books, and they're asking you how good you're doing this. How does an entrepreneur, how do you deal with that, where everyone is expecting you to run these perfect books, and yet your focus is on the idea?
Yeah, so for me, that's a great point. And so the bookkeeping or financial discipline, I'm going to make it broader. Financial discipline is incredibly important if your intention is to raise funding. The thing that I look for is the financial discipline as well. And it's a proxy for so many other things. And I know that we're all over like mad professors, like we've got 100 balls in the air, and this is just one thing. And I particularly, just as I'm talking about failure, I failed accounts one twice. I got it the third time, but I failed it twice. But today, when I sit with my CA and my senior bookkeeper, I'm the one I have learned and to appreciate the importance of finance, understanding an income statement and a balance sheet, how to read them, what's important, and how powerful they are in not just looking backward, which people often criticize them for, but also how to interpret them and use them, especially a balance sheet, in terms of building a business. The most successful entrepreneurs, in my opinion, understand how to use a balance sheet and use leverage of a balance sheet better than others. I'm just conscious of time, Doc, and I want, if you don't mind, let me finish the second part.
Yes. Then yes. We have a couple of basic questions asked by Phil, who is a startup, who's talking about she's worried that is focusing on multiple projects at the beginning, and how does one then figure out which ones to scale up. Then the other one was asking what are the biggest challenges facing South African entrepreneurs today, and I'm sure then this comes up in what you've learned now going forward.
If it isn't, you've planted the seeds, I'll try and answer it anyway. So this is what I learned in post-COVID is, thank heavens I lost the business plan that I didn't, because for me, one of the three pieces of research that I read on business plans that showed there's absolutely no correlation between a business plan and business success. None, zero. And in fact, the one was written in 1994 showed there's negative correlation. If you write a business plan, you're more likely to not succeed. You're more unlikely to succeed. And the reason that they said that was because that once you build a business plan and you have an investor, investors like the rigidity and keep you to the plan that they funded. And then reality hits, or COVID hits, and then you have to make another plan. And for me, because this business is built in a flexible way, so we built a strategy, and then my strategy had to change, but I'm very flexible in how that happened. So it's to me, the important thing here is around the fact that I'm so grateful now that I don't have a mindset that there is a business plan. I have a mindset that I have a strategy. And the strategy, just if you want to go academic here, is the concept of strategic versus opportunistic. And in between, there's called strategic opportunism. And in a strategic opportunistic mindset, you have the flexibility to stick to your strategy, but be flexible to the opportunities that present. And to me, COVID is going to present the most magnificent opportunities for entrepreneurs who have got their eyes focused on that. The second thing now that I learned is this concept of no more geography. Talking about bookkeeping, I own a bookkeeping business. And what I said to the CEO there was that there's no more geography. So let's look to do books for people in the UK, in New Zealand, in Australia. We use this software system called Xero, and they use it all there. And we can. Why should we only look at Johannesburg or South Africa as who we do books for? We can do it for others. So he started a call cycle. He started advertising, and he started picking up one client after the other. Now, if COVID hadn't happened, we wouldn't have even thought of that. So, and I've seen this amongst many of our businesses. All of a sudden, there's no more geography. I am in Johannesburg. I would have driven to Wits, today, but I could be anywhere and provide this lecture. I've given a lecture during this time in Egypt. I never got on a plane, didn't get a visa, and I delivered to a whole audience in Egypt, without, from the comfort of my own office. So that there's no more, the concept of geography as a boundary has disappeared more now than ever before during COVID. This is something we've heard about, unicorns, which is the $1 billion businesses, and everyone was looking for, or especially everyone in the US was looking for these unicorns, these billion-dollar businesses. But today, what's far more important is what they're calling camels. Camels can walk across the desert without food or water for a long time. And for us, especially during COVID time, the aspiration is to find businesses that have high levels of resilience. Resilience now has got more emphasis than scale. There's a resilience, there's a sense of resilience. So if you hear the conversations that are happening in the VC market right now, there's far more emphasis right now on how resilient and how diversified the risk is within this business that I might invest in, versus before it was, how can I make this into $1 billion business? So you see that shift is happening, and I've always been of that opinion that resilience is important. So if you look at Racecorp as an example, we've certainly been affected both positively and negatively, but both positively and negatively. And that's because we have a very diversified view and we've built a camel, not a unicorn. Hopefully, a big camel. This, I think, is my last slide, which is you are never successful. You're always in the process of succeeding. Everyone says, you know, when somebody says, "Oh, you're a successful entrepreneur," I honestly, deeply don't believe that I'm successful. It's a verb. I'm in the process of succeeding. And that has never been more real for me than now, because my big plans 2020, like for many people, was going to be a great year. It started off phenomenal. It's going to be a record year. And then COVID hit in March, and you know, everything went out the window. All the tectonic plates were moving. I didn't know where it was left or right. The first week was quite traumatic for me, to be quite honest. And it took me, you know, at least a week to get my head straight to try and understand what's going on. But no more have I seen also friends who've had, I've got a friend who's got literally, and this is a real story, R1 billion portfolio in properties in the tourism industry, who's not going to make it. So is he successful? He was successful about 5 months ago. He's not successful now. So you're never successful. Okay, you're always in the process of succeeding. Coming back to Doc's point around the fact that these are all these failures are learning opportunities on your journey. So I want to thank you. I'll answer further questions now. But if you want, you can also on Twitter. I tweet every morning some stuff on entrepreneurship at Allon Riaz, or you can email me there or whatever you want. And the one question, what was the one question, Doc, that I didn't answer there? I think it was from Refillware. I heard dogs barking. The biggest obstacle, I think, was the biggest obstacle to entrepreneurship in South Africa. I think that was the question. I think for me, it's to me, the fact that our policies, I think our policies are written. First of all, I'll talk about the one policy where we talk about SMMEs, right? Small, micro, medium enterprises. Anyone who's been in small business knows that there is somebody who's a medium-sized business and a micro business have got nothing in common. They've got different issues completely. And any government policy that talks about SMME policy as if it's all one thing doesn't understand the journey of an entrepreneur. And you cannot have a single brush-all policy. And we've got so many other policies that are so anti-small business. And we talk about loving business, but there's so much policy that's anti-small business. And to me, that I think our policy situation is one of our biggest issues.
Right. The question Refilo was asking was about being a new. Refilo is talking about being an entrepreneur within an organization or as a startup. You would have many focus points, and the question now becomes, what would be the advice on how can one enhance distribution of their service or product? And in this case, Refilo gives an example of an educational app, which I guess is responsive to the current environment. Before you answer, then I'll just put up the other two questions, which so in the interest
I didn't
of time.
understand. So I didn't understand the last question. What is the question is asking me if about entrepreneurship? Yes,
focus on a lot of products, but how does one? What would be the best advice if you want to focus on what is worth distributing? Right. Yes.
Okay.
Right. Then you see, Allon, you've got a lot of followers than you realize. Philip here asked the question that he listened to you on radio the other time, and you made a very emphatic point that startups and small SMEs should not spend most of their money on marketing, and they want you to elaborate, because probably he's thinking, I need to spend every penny I have on marketing so that everyone can know me.
Yeah.
And I'm sure another anonymous question, which is the last one, you already answered. It refers to how does one stay on top in terms of turbulent stuff. And I could see that you went into that whole discussion prior to this question being raised, but I have to raise it anyway.
Okay. All right, let me just, let me try and answer those three. The question around focus on which one to do, it's always, you know, I always tell the story about the entrepreneur where you meet them and they say, I say, what do you do? And then they pull out their card and they go, yeah, on the one side of the card, they say they do weddings, you know, they do events, wedding plan. On the other side, they on their card, they do tents. They've got a tent business, they've got a tent rental business. And then they give you another card, and then in this card, they go, on this card, they do ceilings. So you got, okay, you got tents and you got weddings. I get the correlation. I get, like, yeah, a lot of weddings have tents, and that's how you got it. But how did you get into ceilings? And they say, well, you know, I was doing a wedding once, and we had this tent next to the house, and I walked in and I saw the lady's ceiling was all damaged. And I said to her, you know, I can fix your ceiling. And then you ask them, so how's this business doing? And they say, oh, this business, no, not so, you know, we're waiting for that tender. And how's this, my partner stole from me in that business. And how's this business doing? Oh, well, not so well. And so to me, it's very important for me that entrepreneurs focus, and you've got to choose. And for me, there's a process of how you choose, and it's very much around where your competence lies and where your passion lies and where your opportunity, if you believe your opportunity lies. In the nexus of those three circles is what you choose. But I'm emphatic with entrepreneurs that they choose. They've got to choose. You've got to select. The mental model of the more lines I've got in the sea, the more fish I'll catch is completely proven to be not true. In terms of the marketing, Philip's question around marketing sales, let me just try and say this quickly. What I see with many small businesses is they go and do big advertise, they advertise, because that is a proxy for them to get, it's actually they're hiding from going to sell. For me, the most important thing, especially, and what I would have said, is that branding is not a good thing when you're a small business. You can market, but branding, to put your brand out, who cares about your brand when you're a three-man operation? Who cares about that? It's your ego, and you want to show your mom, and you want to show your friends. It doesn't bring you anything. If you're going to market, do proper marketing with a call to action. But even better than that, have a sales mentality. Forget the marketing guide and sell. Knock on doors. Get calluses on your knuckles, get phones put down on you. That's far more important in the beginning of a business than anything else. In terms of keeping on top, it's this concept of continuously creating new value in the business, this obsession about creating value for your client and new value for new clients that keeps you on top. So obsession of value is if you follow what I've written and talk about and preach about, it's about value. The bottom line of every single small business, big business, is about the creation of value. Understanding what is valuable is much harder than you think. Keep providing that value is even harder, and maintaining that value is the hardest.
Fantastic. Allon, I know you have another event, you have another commitment you're made, and I wouldn't want us to go over time and hold you up and prejudice your next commitment. But I could see that we still have a lot of questions coming in, and we'll probably be calling you back, COVID or no COVID. But there are important issues you have raised, that there are key 4 players in your journey. There are 4 players who have come up. The entrepreneur who is yourself. What is it that you do yourself as the individual? And you raise that point of saying your first mentor, someone who believed in you, who made that distinction between a business and the person. Who do you back, the horse or you back the individual? And in this case, in entrepreneurial space, entrepreneurship is a function of entrepreneurs. Therefore, it is the entrepreneurs who are more important. And this goes now to the space where you are making a lot of impact. Support organizations. Because of your experiences, you have invested a lot in support organizations, believing in others and pushing them to be the best they could be. But naturally, you come back and say, look, this requires policy focus. And that's why I said earlier on, others are now they call you a maverick, and I think you're a trailblazer because your position is very clear. You're saying we need to look at our context and our problems and respond to those rather than wholesome importation of policies. And this speaks to government policy, it speaks to ecosystem. Then also at the end of the day, when you start talking about venture investments, venture capitalists and all that, you're making a point of clear that big business matters because they run value chain. And an entrepreneur needs to understand all these four themselves, understand the support organization, understand the ecosystem, government, understand the value chain where you are in, and you have to make a call. And on that note, I would give you the last word, what would you tell the entrepreneurs and those who are aspiring to be going forward?
I would say that entrepreneurship is the most exhilarating journey that you can take. It is also the hardest journey you can take. And I would highly recommend always, and this is a question that's often asked, I went straight into entrepreneurship. I had a job for exactly 3 months. If I had to do it again, if I tell my children what to do, I would say go and understand how corporates work and how systems work and processes work. Respect that first before you start to become an entrepreneur. And so this whole notion of this 20-year-old entrepreneur is a fallacy. If you look at the Kaufman Institute, the average age of starting an entrepreneur is 34. And there's a reason for that. Your networks aren't formed. Your knowledge base is not formed. So particularly for the young entrepreneurs, get the corporate experience, but don't get chained in terms of your overhead. Don't get chained and keep your overhead low so that when you want to jump, you can jump. Otherwise, you're going to be a prisoner there for the rest of your life.
There we have it. Thank you very, very much. Like you said, we are never successful, but we're in a process of being. And the moment you believe you're successful, then you're a goner. That will be the end. Thank you very much. Lutendo, could you please close up the session? I hand back to you.
Thank you. But I was wondering, Allon, I know there's somebody who asked a question about, could you repeat the names of the books you mentioned at the beginning? I think there are 2 books that you mentioned at the beginning, if that's okay.
I don't remember which books I spoke about. Only The Paranoid Survive is one by Al Grove. Yes. And I don't know which other book I mentioned.
I think, yeah, you've just mentioned them, those 2.
No, that's one book. But if you want book recommendations for entrepreneurs, I'd say get The E-Myth Revisited by Michael E. Gerber. I'd say get understand also the Blue Ocean Strategy. I would talk One from Many from D. Hock. Oh, the other book I mentioned was Blitzscaling by Reid Hoffman. That's what it was, the other book.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah. Yes. Awesome.
All right. So, thank you, Allon. Thank you so much for that informative session. I liked the practicality of it and the honesty of it. And I've been scared. I've been thinking, do I go into that entrepreneurship space? I'm still scared, but I liked how you were just honest in terms of it being, relentless. There is no balance and you got to work at it. So thank you very much. So on behalf of this business school, it was a pleasure hosting you, and to our guests, thank you for joining us. I know some of you are a bit frustrated you couldn't talk, but thank you for joining us in this session. Please take care of yourself, continue social distancing, and take care of your families. We will see you again next time. We have another session that's coming up early August. If you could check our website. Take care, everybody. And thank you, Doctor, for facilitating for us. Dr. M for facilitating for us.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Bye, everybody.